This is interesting. Female overcompensation, is it?
In the work, yeah, but what I've noticed in the workplace is that it's very much the agreeable woman who gets ahead, and she is not the sort of woman who's going to create ripples in the water. She's not going to complain. Fee earners were almost acting like secretaries,
Yeah.
you know, to the predominantly male bosses. When I was going for interviews, this was back in 2003, 4, you know, the amount of all male partner firms I would go for interviews for, you were lucky if you found 1 or 2 female partners. These days, yes, I do see a lot more female partners, but I very rarely see an all female partnered firm. My firm is and was, I have more partners than I do now. They're slowly retiring off. But we were criticised by our regulators for lack of diversity.
Really?
Because we didn't have more male partners. It wasn't that we were saying no. I mean, we weren't advertising the jobs. The work's just not there. But, you know, if a guy came to me and said, you know, would like to buy into your firm, or do you have any work available for me? Of course I would consider his CV. But, you know, I have been burned by having male employees in the past.
Right.
Well, the thing is that I find, you know, people who are in an employee role tend to be very anti-boss, because they think everybody who's self-employed is rolling in money, got a fleet of Mercedes, and that they're worth slogging their guts out to make us loads and loads of money that apparently I'm squirreling away somewhere, because I sure as hell don't see it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they're looking at themselves more on an employee versus employer level rather than women working together, you know, so they're placing the barriers between their own kind, you know, who could be helping them. I think women could get together in the work environment a lot better, but they're not, and they almost seem to pit against each other, and that is exploited by male employers who do stick together. Men do stick together.
They do.
They are almost like a club, and don't even get me started on the bloody golf course.
Oh no.
Which is basically the Masonic lodge everywhere.
Yeah.
And when I was working, this I would say going back to 2007, you know, all the men used to golf and play golf, and we were excluded. We weren't allowed in.
The boys' club.
Yeah, the boys' club. It's very Masonic.
Yeah.
And the women's answer was, oh, well, you know, I'm not interested in golf anyway. And it's like, you don't understand what's going on here. This is where all the deals are made. This is where you're excluded. This is where the work comes in. This is, you know, where powerful men get together, and that's where all the deals get made. And you are excluded. You weren't even allowed to step into the place unless it was ladies' night.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, sometimes I get the invitation to ladies' night. I'm sorry, if I can't go in any other time of the week, no, I'm not going to bloody ladies' nights. You know, stuff them.
Incidentally, and this is why the NHS, and we're seeing a movement in the NHS of, I think, there's a feminine energy going on in the NHS right now.
Yeah.
I think, like, they're starting to understand flexible working. I think since the pandemic, there's been a slight change. Like, flexible working now is, you see, incidentally, I've heard reports of being told of actually a lot of new female bosses now changing their views and allowing their staff to have more flexible working time. There's a movement going on.
That's been going on for quite a long time.
There's corporate feminism happening about now. I mean, one lady said to me, she works for a bank in London, and they said to her, you know, we want to give you flexible working. We realise that, you know, you have to leave your family when you come and work for us. She's got a female boss.
Yes, but again, we're thinking of women in terms of mothers only. And the man's argument, which is the employer's argument, is that, sorry, but sometimes you have to be at work. You know, companies, businesses are machines, and we are all cogs in them. This is what people don't understand. The boss is just the biggest cog, okay? And you need staff there to do certain jobs and to assist you in keeping that machine going. And unfortunately, your own interests may well clash with the interests of that machine.
Well, yeah, they do. They don't align with your values. This goes against what we're talking about now. We're part of the problem. We're part of this cog in the machine.
But why has a feminist issue got to be to take time off for your family? Why has it got to involve taking time off? This is what I'm saying. Why does this seem to be the only women's issues at work?
Because
what about the women who do just want to go to work? What about the women who want to work? What about the women who want to get ahead at work and they can't?
Because if we are,
do you know what my boss said to me? He said, you couldn't be partner here because you'll go off and have babies. That's what one of my bosses said to me.
This is where
13 years ago.
This is where it's so complicated, Anne, because we've got a rise and fall in birth rate, we've got an ageing population, we've got the taboo of care that's not even being discussed, we've got a crisis in the NHS. One can't sustain the other. Well, they both need each other. We need women to have children, And unfortunately, we haven't been
But
able
you're
to...
espousing a very misogynistic view that our primary role is to breed.
I'm not. I'm saying if we want to have a society and
We've
keep
got
it
enough
functioning,
people in the world. We don't need to keep having babies.
well, then what happens with an ageing population? We just become extinct.
No, I mean, people will have children. People are always going to have children. But
But what happens with
why?
childcare? How do...
That was a cockerel, by
just
the
to
way.
let you know,
So,
yeah. He wants to get in with the hens.
The biggest problem that we have with childcare is, and I do blame the Tories in the 80s for this, is that got God, that bloody cockerel. Man interrupting me, stop mansplaining me.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem that we have
He
is the
disagrees.
expense and inflexibility in childcare. So when I was a kid, my mum went to work. She had a very busy job. I hardly ever saw her. My father also worked in London. Both of them worked quite a way. Shut up. From us. And as you know, I used to go home with you. I used to go home with other kids from school and wait until my parents came home. But, you know, in the old days, and the same when my grandmother worked, my mother used to be left with her grandmother because...
But Jermaine Greer talks about this. We used to have STEM family living. It was not nuclear.
Well, we didn't have...
We used to have aunties nearby, grandparents.
I didn't.
We used to have next door neighbours.
Yeah, but I didn't. But what I'm saying is, back then, you could just leave your kids with your friends or the neighbour or someone like that. And then suddenly, everything got changed and everything had to be regulated. And you have to have registered childminders now. And that costs money. And it's absolutely bloody ridiculous, the costs of childcare. And most of that is down to insurance and regulation. Don't even get me started on insurance. I hate insurance. I think it's the bane of everyone's life.
But you
that and cockerels.
Was that safeguarding?
It's not bloody safeguarding.
There was paedophilia going. What was it? Where did it come from? I'm
sorry. I think a mother can decide who is best to look after her child. I would sooner trust a mother's instincts than some bloody knobhead in the council who's going box ticking and going through little certificates of what people claim. I'm not casting aspersions on registered childminders. I'm sure they're all wonderful at their jobs.
Why are we giving our children to complete strangers?
Well, this is it.
They're never going to grow up knowing them.
Because they found there was money to be made in it. There's tax to be made in it. Let's create this middleman.
The care economy.
Yeah, let's create that. And then, you know, I can get some money out of and exploit women who need to go out and work. And then when Labour got in 97, suddenly we scrapped things like the married couples allowance, income support went through the roof, we started getting, and all these other forms of benefits, which actually made it better for women to give up work and stay at home. And it kept women in the kitchen. And that's why I don't agree with the left and their principles, because at least under the right, that yes, they might be exploiting women and making it hard for them, but at least we're going out and working and we're getting careers and we're having opportunities that make us financially independent.
But then our children have been brought up by strangers. So how is that natural?
You know,
how is that natural though?
You know, the fact is, even a bloody meerkat society, the alpha female will go out and hunt and leave her babies with the others. You know, there is nothing. It's not natural for your child to be glued to you 24/7.
I agree with you. It's more natural if you look at, again, outside of European patriarchal colonialists, that the children are being raised by the village. They're not being mollycoddled either.
Yeah.
They're not mollycoddled.
Well, I was one of the generation of the latchkey kids. You know, when I was 10, I was going home on my own. And my father kept guns around the house. Right, they weren't loaded. But he used to keep guns. And yes, they were always secured, I will just say right now. No, they weren't. But I didn't go around playing with the guns, you know, because I knew if I ever touched my father's guns, I'd get a smack, you know. And that's what I'm saying. That's the difference. You know, children... In my day, there was fear of your parents. You didn't go around doing things and being naughty like that. I would go home from school. My mum would have made me a sandwich. I used to eat my sandwich. I used to do my homework, and then I used to watch the Australian soaps and wait for my parents to come home and then start arguing. That was what I used to do from when I was 10. I ended up going through school. I went to college. I went to a good college, and I qualified as a lawyer. I mean, I'm not a terrible person. I'm not a little criminal.
I'm saying you endorsed, your parents endorsed the conservative ideology in terms of their child rearing.
But there are lots of children
in a way,
out
yes
there.
And no. You
don't
were with
need
me a lot, weren't you? But then you could argue my parents were entrepreneurs and they were homebound a lot. So you and your parents had to leave to go to an office.
But what I'm saying is,
my parents created an economic...
Don't get me wrong, I don't doubt that I came from a place of privilege. I will never deny that.
Well, I'm questioning this now. This is what I'm saying.
No, but what I'm saying is that kids being left with strangers or going home on their own does not turn them into rampant little criminals.
But you weren't. What I'm actually saying...
It's not bad for children, is what I'm saying. It's not going to make them
I'm arguing
these
opposite.
awful adults.
I'm saying your parents, in a way, were peddling the conservative ideology, going out to work, but actually they did have the lefty commune there in the form of my mum and dad, who, so my parents managed to create the facade of the village, right? And they did so by being entrepreneurs and building a business from home. So I always had people in and out of the house. There was lots of land. It was materially privileged, things to do. I was never bored. There was always things to explore, people coming in and out, as I say. I was a last born as well, so I was watching all these relationships going. Spoiled brat, yeah, absolutely, and a neglected spoiled brat, which is probably one double
now.
narcissist.
What, you're a narcissist,
What does that make you then, though, in terms of your parents utilised? What I'm saying is you've got parents who created this economic community, because we still kept in touch. So your parents didn't just shove you off to strangers. You were with.
That's what I'm saying. We're agreeing.
Was,
but saying is deregulate childcare. That will get women back into work. The problem that we've got now is for the last 25 years, you have got children growing up in houses where they've seen women do nothing but stay at home because it was better for them economically to do that. So I was raised in a household where your parents went out to work, you go out to work. I grew up with a work ethos because I saw both of my parents going out to work. But there are generations now being born who've never known anything other than sitting at home on benefits. And the concept of going out to work is an optional one.
Yeah.
Right? It's optional to go out and work. No, it's not. Go out and bloody contribute to society and stop making up excuses not to. That's very much my view on things. And you can contribute now in so many different ways. You don't actually have to physically go to an office anymore. Yes, there are jobs where you have to do them physically, but there are lots of jobs out there that are now internet based. You can start up companies on the internet. Yes, that might be unrealistic and optimistic.
Do something is what.
But you can do something.
Don't be
that's the
lazy,
thing.
Do something.
Not every woman worked because obviously there were women looking after me, but that's a contribution in itself because they're doing a job by looking after me. I'm not their child. But the thing is that my mother could pay them what she could afford. And she was able to go out and work because we were not rich. Everyone seems to think that, if you're middle class, you're rich.
It doesn't mean that.
No, it doesn't mean that.
You've got a certain lifestyle. You can be really poor middle class.
You
can spend all your money on private education and have no money for yourself.
What I'm saying is that women's issues in the workplace are not always give me time off to stay at home. And the trouble is it feeds a lot of misogynistic arguments of women, and I've seen this written so many times, of women choose to take time off to have children. Women are choosing to stay at home. In one sense, yes, if you're not having an abortion every time you're getting pregnant, is it a choice to have a baby? I suppose technically yes, but there's so much more complicated. I know it is.
It's so
I know it is.
This is nature. This is biology. We didn't choose to be in this body. We were born with wombs and ovaries, and we're born in a planet with men who want to impregnate us.
But the problem is the issue of women and childcare. It seems to be the only issue. It's the only issue that's ever voiced by women, and it's not. There are so many other issues in the workplace other than I need time off to take care of my kids or pick up my kids. You have women who don't have kids, but they have ill and dependent relatives, or they've got other issues going on. Harassment goes on in work, bullying still goes on in the workplace, lack of opportunity still goes on in the workplace. And the problem is that a lot of those come from the fact that men will say, yeah, but you need to take time off. So they are actually using women's own arguments against them.
So their own biology, their own bodies, their own...
They're being using them against them.
Fact that they're,
but even when you are not a mother, they still use it against you. Because you might one day. There are a lot more issues than that. So the end result is that the sort of women who are getting ahead in the workplace are ones who are running around driving themselves into a frazzle. No, the ones who are not career driven, the ones who are agreeable. The ones who mother their bosses, the ones who don't create ripples in the water, the ones who agree with everything that men say.
When I say career
kiss
women,
their asses, turn on other women. They are the women who get ahead.
When I say career women, I'm talking, in my view, a career woman is someone who starts her own business and doesn't answer to a man.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about women who are higher up in the corporate ladder, really.
So this is something I've seen on a snippet, and it does go on.
But this is the culture of agreeability.
I worked in a corporate, very male-dominated corporate setting, and I lasted 6 months. It took me about a month, well, not even a month. It took me a week before I could see the sexism, the systemic sexism. The women were, been there for years. One woman there for years, never been promoted. She'd given her life to the company, had a terrible relationship with her children, because her children always felt that she abandoned them for her career.
But that's children growing up with an expectation of having a mother around all the time, you know.
Yeah, so anyway, she couldn't do any right, this woman. You could see she lived with this guilt. And she was very, you know, you could see some of the women were. And
but
they were just,
society's
these
answer...
were knackered women. And they had dreams and desires. And they said, oh, I'd love to do this, run my own business and do this. These women didn't want to be stuck in this corporate conveyor belt. They just didn't. And I just thought, screw this, I'm getting out of it. Because I could see I'll end up, before I know it, she said to me, you're worth far more than this.
Yeah, but some women
do. A trolley dolly for men.
Yeah, but some women do.
Phones,
some women do want careers. What I cannot stand. Yeah, but what I cannot stand is this constant answer to the problems women face on the corporate conveyor belt is get her off the conveyor belt. Drop out. Quit. You know, what about women who want to have careers? What about women who want to have the careers they want to have? They want to do the work I mean, that's a lot of the reason I set up my own firm, is because I didn't like the way we did things at my office, you know, where I had to time how long I was on the toilet. You know, everything was a chargeable minute.
Okay.
And I wasn't able to do my job and give my clients the service that I felt they deserved. And it was the best move I ever made, because I ended up doing a case that was probably my biggest case. It's probably the case of my career. I'm very proud of it. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I carried on in that firm. But women are expected to be agreeable. Then they can't make suggestions. They can't ask for changes in the workplace itself, because they're expected to be agreeable. Or the answer is, if you don't like the way it works, get out.
That's what happened with me. I asked for flexible working.
Yeah.
And I wasn't granted it.
And I hate that. And I know this is going to sound extremely unpopular, but it's almost appealing to innate laziness of human beings to say, tell you what, we'll pay you to stay at home. The government will pay you to stay at home. And you sit and think, oh, good, I'd never have to go to work. I don't have to commute. I don't have to do this. And it's very appealing. We give you lots of money, stay at home. I know it's not lots of money, but back then it was quite a bit of money. You know,
or
stay
you
at home.
Other people who don't actually, and I do call these people more ADHD productive types, who don't sit still.
Well, that's the thing. We haven't even touched on disabled women.
No, this is what I'm saying. Those types of people who will go and start their own business. ADHD people more likely to be entrepreneurs. Did you know that? I don't know if you're... Can I just touch on something, Anne? Because I've got 2 children. It's constant guilt. I remember a mum saying to me, you know, the moment you have a child, ergo the feeling of guilt, the story of guilt, pre-guilt and after guilt. And this is what happens as a woman. You become conflicted. What do I do? Is being a homemaker enough? Is running the home? Oh, I should be doing more. Oh, I should be restarting my career. Oh, I should be... There's always this I should be feeling.
I don't think that's just something that's for mothers. I think that's all women up to a certain age feel constant shame. And that's, again, we're going back to shame and agreeability. I mean, all of this really that we've discussed is tied into the power of shame and making women agreeable to feed the entitlements of men. And I think ultimately, I think all women get to a certain point in their lives where they just start to not give a shit. Men will say it's menopause, you know, I don't know. There's always some stupid little off-the-cuff dismissive way of dealing with it. But I think whether you had kids or not, you know, I feel guilt every day. I'm not doing enough. I'm spreading myself so thin around my responsibilities inside and outside the workplace. I have no satisfaction with my life. I'm not doing the things I want to do, and particularly since my mum has been in hospital and I've had to run the firm all by myself, and I'm the only bloody idiot who clears out that office. I've had no time to myself. This is the first time I've actually done something during the day for myself since February. You know, and I've been really looking forward to it, and I've enjoyed it, and it's just having a bit of you time for you to think about yourself as a person, as a whole person. I don't necessarily think that's just restricted to mothers. I don't think it's necessarily even just restricted to women. I think men complain about this too. And men feel dissatisfied. I think we all feel dissatisfaction in life, but I do think that unfortunately a byproduct of being an intelligent species is you understand the futility of your existence. And I think if we didn't have what we have now, if we didn't live in a civilized world,
shelter and food,
we'd be in a cave still having to hunt everything down every day and being hunted. I don't think that there is an answer of a lifestyle that is natural that means that we would be happy every day. You know, the most miserable people can be the most lazy.
Yeah.
So it's people want to label it, and they want to say, oh, it's because you're you're this type of mum, or you're that type of mum, or you're not a mum, or you're this type of woman or that type of woman. But I think we're so busy trying to affix labels to the depression that we feel. Right. I think that we have all got to deal with the vicissitudes of everyday life. The problem that we have is we have to put up with these artificial, stupid and completely unnecessary and sometimes dangerous vicissitudes of sexism, everyday sexism on top of it.
Absolutely.
You know, the guilt has to be extra thick for us, not just the standard.
And by virtue of our sex, because of our stature, we've had it inbred in us that we are the weaker sex. And the shame comes in and the guilt comes in, and I think there's a proclivity for us to err on the side of anxiety as well because of it, because of the fact we do have a womb and an ovaries and hormones. So it's self-awareness. It ultimately comes down to having self-awareness, having empathy, and also calling people out.
I think that the key to dealing with depression and guilt and shame is actually to lose that ability to feel shamed. I don't feel shame anymore, and that's all I felt probably in the first 35 years of my life, was feeling ashamed all the time, feeling guilty all the time. The anxiety and the depression that then comes from that, it gets so bad that, you know, it can make life intolerable. Once you start to lose shame, once you start to feel a self-esteem, then I think that's the key to not necessarily being happy, but at least being content. The problem with that is the other side of that is narcissism, and I think that's the trouble. I think people are countering anxiety with narcissism.
I just want to talk. We do this and nothing bloody changes.
No.
And that's what annoys me, is we sit here.
But things are changing. Real change comes about slowly.
Well, what happens is I'm hoping this will achieve collective consciousness. Even if 98% of what we say disagrees with us, there might be something that they just go, oh yeah, actually. There's an aphorism. There's an aphorism. It's sharing.
It's saying you're not alone.
Yeah. And also saying there's nothing wrong with that. I say about the patriarchy, what we mean by the patriarchy is a system of power. Patriarchy is not saying we're all man haters. I really feel for some men.
Man hate, I hate that stupid expression. The fact is, men hated us first. If women are hating men, and there are misandrists out there, self-confessed misandrists out there, that is down to a hell of a lot of abusive experience. And if men can't handle that.
But this is what Germaine Greer talks about. She thinks that men inherently hate women.
Yeah, they do. She said that. She said women will never know how much men hate them.
Whereas, you see, I don't feel hateful towards anyone. I don't know whether that's a female disposition. I have done things I've regretted. However, I've apologised. I've always...
You have?
I did a couple of things.
Is it a fake apology?
No, it was genuine, because I was... Well, you could argue it was narcissism because I felt bad. It was me feeling bad about what I'd done. I don't know if that's empathy or guilt or regret. What I'm trying to say is we all behave terribly. We can all be responsible for... What I'm trying to say is we're not our behaviour. We all have the ability to behave in unwholesome ways.
Yeah.
It's about being able to not stay in there and come out of it and say, actually, that what I did was wrong. I
think women apologise too much, to be honest. I mean, you're talking about an individual situation when you've done something bad and you hurt somebody and you feel guilt and you apologise.
Well, I think I was emotional, and then a man would sit there and say, oh, well, you're a woman, this is hysteria. So if I was in the 1940s, Freud would be sitting and saying, oh, so you had female hysteria.
Yeah.
So again, the men would assign this to being female.
Yeah.
Now, I've put a cap on that very much so recently. I think partly age and cooling down and your hormones sort of levelling out and not...
I think the fact is most people don't give a shit.
Oh, yeah.
They just don't. That's what I'm saying. People live such busy lives. There's so much self-interest, self-concern these days that nobody listens. I think that people could empathise, but I think ultimately the problems that people go through, sometimes people just are not able to help them. It's not within their power to do it. And yet situations can seem so diabolical for the sufferer. Just talking about their problems isn't enough. They need someone to come in and help. And most of the time people just are so busy or so, dragged down by their own problems that they don't have the mental or physical ability to be able to do it. And I think that's the biggest problem in relationships.
this is a difficult topic, because you've got the nurse who's rushed off her feet, you never gets time to yourself, or you, the lawyer who's rushed off her feet, running everything like a swan effect, versus the entitled mummy's boy or daddy's girl who've never had done a day's work in their life, who don't take initiative, who are mollycoddled, who have depression because they don't know how to get out there into the world. Do you feel sorry for someone like that, or do you think...
No.
What I'm saying is, where do we draw the line between genuine depression and actual entitled laziness, or just the coming of age laziness, where, you know, teenagers, a young man or woman is just...
People need to just grasp the fact that life is hard. You know, there is nothing easy in life, and stop trying to make your life easy. Try to make it easier, yes, but stop getting this expectation that there is a life out there that is easy. It's not, because I can tell you now, even people who don't work, who don't have any responsibilities, who've got somebody doing everything for them or paying everything for them, those people still live under a threat that tomorrow it could all end. And that can drive them insane, that thought. Some of the most hysterical people I know are people who don't work.
Yeah.
Work actually, I sound like a workaholic here, but work actually it is a form of therapy in itself. It gives you routine, it gives you purpose, and it gives you a change of scenery as well, structure. Yeah, it does a lot. Yes, it is bloody stressful, but it's stress that you can, hopefully, most of the time, leave at the door when you go home, and you feel you've done something for the day, and it's a good feeling.
But you could argue that's a conservative ideology as well, because you could argue that it comes from this ideology that work is noble. It's a very noble thing.
But, you know, why do we do anything?
So
it's people who are sitting on their butts who are not contributing at all. They're not giving back anything. They're the ones who have absolutely no purpose in life. They're going to be the most miserable.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, like, we're apes, and apes live in societies, and everybody in the group has to do something.
Roles.
Yeah, what people want is to be children, where, you know, the roles are not assigned yet, and they're in this kind of no man's land of where they're growing up and they're just being looked after and they don't have to worry about anything. And that's what people, I think, yearn for, is to be a child again.
But just very quickly to finish it on, shame is the fear of being unworthy of love, connection and belonging, and the absence of love and connection and belonging as a human being. And there's always suffering, she said. So we have to say to ourselves, look, I'm not a bad person, but I did a bad thing. That's what I teach my daughters. I try and say they're not their behaviour. We can behave badly, but it doesn't mean we are bad. And I think that, are you saying this is where women on the whole feel more shame?
Yeah, but they feel ashamed just for existing.
So then why
they haven't done anything bad?
Okay, I just need to put this in, because I'm questioning, why is it then when women feel depressed, they seek other people, or they seek community to get themselves out of this rut, and men, well, this is a saying.
No, I think this is...
Well, let me just finish. And men commit suicide, or men basically spiral into alcoholism or chain smoking. They're self-destruction. Men self-destruct, whereas women reach out.
No, they don't. And I do think this is a myth that is put out there largely by the incel brigade. Actually, I've read sources which suggest that men and women attempt suicide in equal numbers, but men tend to use methods, and as callous as this is sounding, men tend to use methods where they're more likely to actually kill themselves, whereas women, they'll use other methods which can often result in the suicide going wrong or right, whichever way you want to look at it.
Right, because men are inherently more violent in a way. They're more violent to themselves. Because
I don't think so. I think men actually tend to externalise their violence more than women do.
Oh no, they do. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, when men kill themselves, they really they go for it. They go for the jugular.
Yeah.
Literally. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't necessarily agree that all women feel they can talk. I certainly don't. I think there are a lot of women out there who feel they can't express how they feel. They're made to feel too ashamed.
Is that liberal feminism, though, saying we need to be more masculine?
Is that liberal feminism? That's conservative feminism.
Well, liberal feminism says we're the same. It says we're the same. We can do whatever we want. Liberal feminism is a way of...
Well, then I would have thought that liberal feminism would be promoting women to go out and talk to people if they want to. I think, I don't know. I mean, I think I think it's more equal for both than people would like to admit. I think the trouble is the incels want to say that men have it just as tough as women, and feminists have no reason to complain.
Yeah.
Because they don't like women, and they don't like being made to feel like they're bad or abusive people, which is exactly what they are. And I think that they've caught on to these statistics of men dying by suicide more than women, as almost not only a way of saying that men actually have it tougher than women, but also that women are so abusive that all these men are killing themselves. Almost like there's a presumption that this is down to women, that men are committing suicide. I think there's an agenda there, isn't it? Under the age of 40 or something, where suicide is the biggest killer of men, and yet under 40 for women, if it's not disease, we're talking about something obviously that's not disease, it's actually homicide for women.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Women,
so if men weren't killing women would be killing themselves. That's one argument you could use here, that female suicide would be just as high, but attempts to commit suicide are equal, and in fact female suicide now is on the rise.
Well, like you've just said, women victims of homicide and abusive, coercive control as well.
I'm just very conscious of the fact that we're discussing women's issues, and the usual sort of antidote to having to think about women's issues is to raise men's issues. Like, men's issues have to invade every conversation about women. I mean, I do think that male suicide is largely down to patriarchal society, yes, and toxic masculinity. It's been men being told they can't cry, men being told they can't talk about their feelings. But I equally think that there are a lot of women out there who feel they can't come forward and talk about how they feel, or complain about things that happen to them. There are a lot of women who do engage in very self-destructive behaviours, reckless driving, alcoholism, drugs. The trouble is, again, we always seem to think of women in terms of mothers, and it's an alcoholic mother, it's a mother taking drugs, and it's the children who are at risk. We never look at the woman, we're looking at everybody around the woman.
Yeah.
We're looking at the men, we're looking at the children, but we never really look at her.
Yeah.
The thing is, we do get this silly notion in our heads that we're all Disney princesses who get together in our little Disney princess groups and sit there crying and talking about our feelings and go off and have spa treatments. Most women I know do not do that.
No.
Most women I know are struggling silently. I think the other reason why female suicides aren't as high, though, is because they have more responsibilities to other people, and that's why I think they don't kill themselves as much.
Yeah.
What will my children do? Who will look after my children? Who's going to look after my disabled mother? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? Like I said, it goes back to women being the organisers.
Absolutely.
And they think it's all going to fall apart.
Absolutely.
I think it's a combination of that and...
Absolutely, because you could argue that to take your own life is the most selfish thing you could do.
I don't necessarily agree with that. In fact, I actually think it's one of the bravest things you can do, to be honest. I think it takes a hell of a lot to actually go through with it and kill yourself.
So then what do you make of... This is a very complicated subject.
It is, and it's going to be one where whatever you say, people are not going to like it, and it's going to probably be irresponsible.
It's a really dark... And you could argue, they say, there was an anthropologist that said people in tribes, that the suicide, regardless of sex or gender, it is higher among Western societies than tribal societies. Now, obviously, we don't...
I think
this is what I've
heard. That's because we live in such an artificial society, though. I mean, also...
We are artificial. We're deracinated from nature, aren't we?
I don't know, I think a lot of women... I've noticed this in divorces when women come, to me, they don't seem to have a clue about what's going on in the financial side of their marriages. They seem to think their husbands have a lot more money than they actually do. They see things like the cars and the houses, and they think they're rolling in dough, and in fact a lot of it's on credit loans, and the husbands are hiding this.
Really?
I think a lot of financial pressures can induce suicides, actually, more than people really want to admit.
Right.
And also ill health. But I think the thing is with women, yes, they are unhappy, and the thing is suicide about feeling unloved? Is it about feeling trapped? Is it about feeling that you don't have any role, that you don't matter? It could be so many reasons why you're committing suicide. I don't think there's a simple answer as to why do men commit suicide more than women. I think there could be lots of different reasons, and I think some suicide attempts could be cries for help, which I hate it when people kind of dismiss that, like, oh, well, they didn't really mean it. Well, no, they do mean it. They do want to commit suicide. They really want to commit suicide, but there is something in them, an instinct, a survival instinct or something, which is stopping them and keeping them in this absolute bloody torture. And I don't think that's a better situation than somebody actually ending their life.
But then you could argue there is something about you say, Anne, as you say, this is smoking a nice fag, Anne.
Yeah.
That's slow suicide.
The slow road to suicide. Well, yeah, you're right. We all engage in destructive behaviours because we need something that's not being fulfilled, and we're turning to other silly little crutches. Suicide is really... I'm not a therapist. In fact, actually, I think my friend who is would be really useful in this sort of conversation.
A real misogynist man, I could imagine, would turn to you and say, you know what you need to get yourself sorted? You need to get pregnant and have a family.
Fuck off.
But that's what a man...
Seriously. Do you know the times I've been suicidal in my life is when I was in a relationship or just coming out of one. That's the only time I've ever felt lonely in my life, was in a relationship.
A right wing, and that's rubbish, because that's like saying, oh, well, why is it then? If that's the case, right, then why are some of the unhappiest women mothers?
Oh, yeah. They reckon married women are more stressed than single women, and single men are more stressed than married men. Is that right?
I could believe that. I could absolutely believe that. And we'll go step onto this in the next podcast. Because it's so uncomfortable to be human, especially in this Western artificial world. We're a very imaginative species, and we're able to create narratives and live by those narratives.
Yeah.
And what's happened is, in the trans movement, we've created a narrative where we've eroded biology. We've gone down a rabbit hole of fiction, and we are ignoring fundamental scientific
I think next
biology.
week we definitely have to do the turf argument, because I think you and I understand some of your arguments, but I don't necessarily agree with them.
I don't agree. And
it's funny, because I think you were arguing what I was arguing 10 years ago, and I'm now arguing what you were arguing 10 years ago.
I obviously have come from in a unique situation in that I was seduced by the ideology that, you could find a man and a woman in one body. This two-spirit thing, I completely was seduced by it 10 years ago. And I genuinely believed that, and obviously I went with it. I ran with that ball, and I didn't meet someone who was the embodiment of a woman. I met a man who was dressing and wanted to present as a woman. And our communication styles were polar opposite, and that resulted in a breakdown of a relationship.
But that could apply to any relationship.
This is the thing, and I think this is what we need to discuss. Shall we discuss that next time?
We'll discuss that next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was fun. That was our first podcast.
You're more queen of clubs, and I'm like bad sidekick. I like come up the side to you and go, yeah, that's right. She's right. That's right. King Harold.
I'm not right. This is my experience, and it's my point of view. Everyone else.
Well, I will challenge you occasionally if I dare.
You can try.
If I dare.
Yeah.
I'll be whipped after this.
Yeah. All right then. Well, thank you to the one person who's probably switched off about an hour and a half ago. Hopefully, if this is any good, we will see you again next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.